artificial nest boxes. We can provide very quickly and actually rather easily provide them with artificial nest boxes. And that's really what we focused on to start with 4.5 years ago. No pesticides. Well, clearly, if you start killing the insects, it works up the food chain and you're damaging, the bird species and others further up. And grow more flowering plants. Pollen means pollinators, means food for the birds. So there are some things that you can really do rather quickly and an individual level and a community level as well to help them out. So our initial focus, really, having learned rather quickly about what the issues were, was to focus on getting some nest sites up in Wolverton. Hello, we're back, everybody. So here, talking about our nest box solutions, and I'll come back, Jenny, to talking about Wolverton. So the artificial nest box solutions, let's see if this works now. Is it that one? Yes, it's this one. Right. The artificial nest box solutions. This is the most basic, if you like, a wooden construction. It's a very well-proven design. If it's well coated, well painted and well varnished, it's really quite long lived. The entry hole there is of a specific size, dimensions, so that the swifts can zoom into it, really headlong, and few other species can get into it. Sparrows are very commonly occupy them, but usually they've finished their breeding cycle before the swifts arrive. And in any case, swifts are very aggressive birds. Once they know where they're going, they will oust anybody else that's in. So that's the most basic design. In terms of talking about house martins, as you're probably aware, they make mud cups, as they're called, on the outside of buildings. So it's always easy to see where house martins are, whereas on the other hand, it's not easy to see where swifts are nesting, because once they're in their little holes, you can't see them. So the artificial house martin nest is made of something called woodcrete. It's a mixture of wood and concrete, I guess. Sounds like it. And that means that the house martins, when they come back to it, excuse me, are not having to rebuild the mud nest, the mud cup every time. What they will do is they'll add their little bits of mud around the entry hole, because that's kind of their instinct. But the other advantage of that is that you can fit the house martin cups into places where their own mud cups wouldn't stick, like a UPVC soffit or something like that, because they fall off, they dry, and it crumbles, and they have to start again. So there are solutions, there are easy and cheap solutions for both of them. They're about 20 quid each, roughly. Down here is an enhanced version of the Swift box, which is completely made of UPVC. So it's very, very long lasting, if not, as long lasting as the house itself. And again, it's only about 20 quid. So it's a worthwhile investment, if you like. Up here is the ultimate solution. These are called Swift bricks. And these can be built into new builds or extensions very simply, costing hardly anything more than a normal brick would be. It fits in, as you can see, probably just about. The size of the brick, or the size of the Swift brick, is the same as a standard brick, fits in into the both layers of, if that's the right word, thank you, into the cavity wall. Thank you, Emma. And it's very easily fitted, and at very little cost. And all of us around the country are trying to, let's say, encourage local government and national government to enforce the inclusion of Swift bricks in every new house that's built. It's an ongoing process. National government wants to leave the decisions, the regulations, if you like, to local councils. So in our case, we're talking often to people like Wolverton Council, Stony Stratford Council, and others about including the inclusion of Swift bricks in every new build. So we will get there one day because it makes sense. Lastly, this is a sort of an interesting approach. This one doesn't need ladders. I should point out that that's the sort of person you need to get in to install your Swift bricks and boxes. So it's a very specialized and terrifying venture to get up a ladder that's, you know, up to the gutter level, which is an issue, because if you're a voluntary organization like we are, and you're providing Swift boxes, the next barrier you get to is, so who can fit it for me? Fortunately, we've been incredibly lucky in Wolverton, particularly, in finding tradespeople that are used to using ladders and are happy to do this for the community. At the moment, we've got a couple of suppliers who do that for us, and they charge about £25. So, you know, for £50, you've got a nest box of any of those types and somebody to fit it, and that can be done very quickly. Lastly, yes, as I was saying, this is a box that fits directly up into the soffit. So you actually don't need a ladder to get up there. You can crawl into the loft, do your jiggery pokery down through the soffit, and then fit that. And it's the same, it's just as well used as the other ones are, and obviously much easier to fit. So there are many ways to crack a nut. So we haven't got any, have we? There's a little model here of one that Ian made for us. So what happens, if you can see, is that the Swift goes up into the entry hole, crawls along, and there's a little nest cup there. They don't take much material in, but it's a way of making sure that their big, clumsy wings don't knock the egg out of the entry hole, because that is a real risk. So there we are. They were the solutions we went for. So a couple of slides about the birds themselves, because we've sort of spoken about ourselves more or less. This is kind of what the Swifts do. This was a bird that was tagged, well, a few years ago, excuse me, now, but it's pretty typical of what the Swifts' travels look like. See if this bit works. Yes. So here we are in the UK, just in case you didn't notice. As you probably know, the Swifts have just recently left us for this year's breeding season, and they will take about a month to get down to that part of Africa. And from that point onwards, they're going to be flying around that part of Africa for the next 9 months, feeding, building themselves back up after a hard breeding season. After that 9 months, they start to get the urge to move again, and back up they come, whoops, this way now, and arrive back with us usually around the first week of May, usually. That's pretty impressive, I reckon. Remember, they don't land. They can't land safely. And that journey is 14,000 miles round trip. And that's without all that flying around down there. They don't breed until they're 2 or 3 years old. But they still do the same journey backwards and forwards for those 2 or 3 years. What that means, therefore, is that they're continuously flying for about 50,000 miles until they land in the UK and the rest of Northern Europe to breed, which I reckon is pretty cool. So that's the most basic thing that I think is quite amazing about them. There are a couple of other things as well before we move back to the UK. Their closest modern relatives are, in fact, hummingbirds. They're not related to swallows or house martins or sand martins, which are called hirundines. They are related more closely to hummingbirds. So it's a case of partial convergent evolution, but they have rather similar lifestyles. They do everything on the wing, as you've seen, 50,000 miles before they actually think about breeding. The sleeping on the wing is pretty impressive. They actually go up very high, switch off half the brain. I don't know how long for. There's lots we don't know yet. They switch off half the brain, obviously start descending, wake up again, go back up, switch off the other half of the brain, and they're rested. And all the other stuff, you know, is kind of simple after that, isn't it? And by the way, they don't only mate on the wing; they also mate in the nest box. So that's, you know, that's not so clever. Here's another one. If they can't collect enough food locally to feed their chicks with, or even feed themselves for that matter, the parents will fly a long way. Potentially, let's say, the Netherlands or somewhere else in Europe, which is pretty impressive. So that means that the chicks and the eggs are left for quite long periods of time. Uniquely, I believe, in the case of birds, the chicks actually, in that situation, can go into a state of torpor, which means that the metabolism goes down, and therefore they don't start to use up too much energy and starve. Likewise, the eggs can also tolerate quite a drop in temperature while they're not being, what's the word? Incubated, yeah, or the other word. So that's, I think, pretty impressive as well. So there are so many facts about these birds that we've learned since we started this. And it seems to me that they're pretty worth saving. So this is what we did. We created, for those of you who love social media, Martin, we created a Facebook page called Save Wolverton Swifts and Martins. We were both very familiar with social media, me in particular with Facebook, and it's a really good way of gathering people with common interests, sharing information with them, and it worked really well. We started it up as an experiment. We didn't know what local support we'd get, but we did. It worked really well. This is what we were talking about when Zoom went quiet, I'm afraid. Why Wolverton? Wolverton has a lot of Victorian building stock. A lot of it still has crevices and cracks where the swifts find to nest. But as we said earlier, it's all being gradually refurbished and renovated and prettied up. Therefore, that's why they need our help. So what did we do? We found a way of offering nest boxes to the Wolverton residents, and we were just overwhelmed with demand. It was fantastic. It was so reassuring that people shared, you know, our love of these birds. We did that by applying to Wolverton Town Council for a grant and they were ever so supportive. We then went out and bought a large, I can't remember, quite a large number of nest box. How many? 80, was it? Yeah. From a lovely man called John Stimpson, who has built like 50,000 of these boxes since he retired. Wow. Lives in Ely. And in addition to that, a lot of people in Wolverton decided, well, we'll make our own. They're not difficult to make. It's just, you know, loads of bits of wood in the right configuration with the right dimensions. And they did that as well. So I'll give you the numbers in a minute, by the way, but it's pretty impressive. And this really was in the first couple of years, wasn't it? Yeah, it started before the first lockdown in 2020. And within that first 2 years, we had large numbers installed. At the same time, some of us managed to get around the town and identify where they were making natural nests, because as we said, it's an old town. There's lots of potential sites there, and you know, we managed to discover where some of those nest sites were. Martin Kincaid actually helped us on the way with a lot of encouragement and some previous records, actually. So that was, you know, that really boosted our morale. There's whoops, didn't mean to do that. Or that. There's an app and a web thing called Swift Mapper, which was sponsored by the RSPB. And it's a method of logging everything it says there, you know, natural sites, where you've put artificial boxes, and then behind that you can log how long they've been used for breeding. So this is kind of what it looks like, with a few scribbly additions by me. This is Wolverton, very square town. The yellow dots there, as you can see, are the natural sites that we've identified. The green ones are the artificial boxes that we've supplied and the residents have kindly put up. So it's a pretty good spread around town. And, you know, the birds will take time to find these sites. And I think we had 6 of them occupied this year, yours for 2 years running. And the other thing that we've done, and I'll talk about swift callers a bit more in a few slides' time. There's something called a swift caller, which plays swift calls and fools the birds into thinking there are swifts nesting locally. And that's a really fast way of accelerating take up of the nest boxes. We'll play you some in a moment. So what we did, so that's what it kind of looks like. Whoops. We fitted in that, let's say, a couple of years, 130 of those swift boxes that look kind of like that. Whoops. We identified 14 of those natural swift nest sites, and there must be many, many more to find if we had the right people. And distributed 16 swift callers, again to accelerate the take-up of the boxes. In the case of not forgetting our house martins, we also supplied 20 house martin cups, as requested by the residents, and Emma did a kind of a survey and discovered that in a particular building within Wolverton, called the Top Club, an old working man's club, there were 44 natural cups built around that. That's particularly important because that building is at risk, let's say, of being sold to somebody who potentially might renovate, and therefore the house martin colony really is therefore at quite, under quite a lot of threat. In the meantime, we got involved in all kinds of other stuff. Emma, in particular, last year, was it, did 22. So what happens is that the chicks get impatient and they get hot and they go to the entrance hole and sometimes fall out. And if they're not at the right weight and the right development for flying, they just flop to the ground. Having done that, they are not able to take off from the ground because they're not developed enough. The feet are not useful for climbing. And therefore they need a huge amount of support. So around the country, there are, I don't know, hundreds of these swift rehabbers, as we call them. Certainly not enough, that's for sure. Only 20. Wow. Yeah. So it's a case of rescuing them. And by the way, if you ever see a swift on the ground, don't just pick it up and throw it back in the air. It needs proper care. It needs proper feeding because they are, their diet is unique and very, very specialized. So it's the recovery to save it from being. Yeah. That's obviously the big risk. Yeah. Yeah. Very specialized.
Only on the English one is aerospace, which is quite a far away to get to. But yeah, it takes about 16 years.
So yeah, the rehabilitation is a major exercise because it's specialized food, very expensive, very special conditions you need to keep them in. You need to get them to the right weight, and as well as the right stage of development to release them. As you can see here, notice the position of the hand. He hasn't thrown it. You put the swift on your hand, and if it's ready, it will take off, and that's quite an emotional moment. So that's happening all around the country because the chicks need to be preserved for future generations. What else did we do? We were consulted by the Open University. We've got a friend in Wolverton called George Bryant, who works at the OU, and he's done a number of wildlife projects at the OU. And he had this great idea of putting swift nest boxes up. And he enlisted the handyman people at the OU, and this is what they made. We provided sort of guidance on dimensions and height and positioning. Positioning is very important. And this is what they made. 3 of these, 3 5-way nest boxes. And there you can see the little nest dip cup inside. And there are the 15 nest box, nest holes, nest box accesses for them. We haven't heard back from them, sadly, so we don't know whether they've been occupied yet. But that was a major thing. And we were just kind of consulting in that particular case. So having got 170 something boxes up in Wolverton, we kind of sat back and relaxed. No, we didn't. We got involved in some other things. Here's one. New Bradwell, which you may or may not know is nearby to Wolverton, is what they call an eco church. I don't know whether you've heard of that. There's an eco church rating now where the churches can register and upgrade themselves depending on how they're looking after their environment. St. James has got a bronze rating, which means they filled in the first forms. And we're really keen to move on. So dear old Ian here climbed up with me into the belfry, which is that one there, and custom made a couple of boxes without impinging on the stonework, and so that the swifts could get in and the holes were not visible from the outside. So aesthetically, it's completely invisible. So this was May of this year. We also provided one of our callers, which I'll show you in a moment. That's the plan view, and that's kind of where it is. The church is quite interesting because it's got a wooden spire. They ran out of money apparently, and never got round to building a stone spire. So it's got this wooden spire, and there are 94 steps up there, I can tell you, and it's very tight. So they're there. I'm ready to host a couple of families of swifts in the future. Just moving on from that, we are also talking to a church in Old Wolverton. That's rather non-specific, but you'll know which it is. And they are keen to do the same thing. And they've got a real spire. Now, and this is probably one of the more recent things that we've done. We're really keen on getting children involved, and because, you know, if they grow up knowing about these things, it's kind of a good thing because they can then pass it on to their children. So we did a session in their after-school art club. That was quite fun, wasn't it? Yeah. Was it Christmas? Yeah, that's right, because we were making Swift Christmas cards with them. And they loved it. You know, it was sort of soft teaching, if you like. We had some of these leaflets there with us, and these other props. There's our woolen Swift, which is pretty much life size, maybe a bit better. And they loved it. And the staff were absolutely superb, because then they carried on and said, we'd like, well, I think probably Emma suggested it actually, because she's a bit of a bully. And eventually they said, yes, we'd love to. Actually, it was dead easy, an easy sell. And we had managed to build up some funds by that point. Ian, who I still can't see. Oh, is he? Oh, there he is. Ian had been selling his boxes, and that's not the one. And we'd been raising funds that way, and eventually managed to buy this lovely box from a company called Impeccable. Yeah, I know. I tell you what, it looks huge, but it's actually really quite light. It's made of fiberglass, and apparently is very successful. Now, here's here's what's called the Swift Caller. I've actually got, you know what Swifts sound like, so I won't play it. It's a very small box, that sort of size. Doesn't have to be fixed. Can be just dangling out of the window close to the nesting box. And if you put a timer on it, it can play the Swift calls at dawn and dusk, which is when the Swifts are close by. If you play it all day long, it probably annoys the neighbours, which we don't want. So that was Bushfield School, and hopefully we can build on that with some other local schools as well. Oh yeah, we've got two more at another Wolverton school called Wyvern. And then another bright idea that Emma had was to have a welcome back party for the Swifts this year. they were a little bit late coming back this year because the weather over Europe was horrible. And we were all getting a bit worried that they weren't going to make it. But they did. And Emma had planned this welcome back party for the 12th of May, wasn't it? Yes. And these are some of the photos. It went really, I wasn't there, sadly, but it went really well. We had a samba band, and the kids had made lots of, Swift toys on sticks and things like that. And it went really well. Some of you may recognize this person. Yeah, that was a brilliant idea. So we're going to do it again next year, aren't we? And I'll try and make it this time. Yeah. Oh, good. And as you may have seen, we've got our lovely merchandise. I have to say, I thought it was a bit cheesy to start with, but it's really worked, hasn't it? Well, it's just my opinion, but it's really worked. So I'm completely wrong. So we've got these lovely T-shirts. We've got these here. These are wicker. Is that the right word? No, willow. Excuse me. Willow swifts made by a lovely lady in Wolverton who grows her own willow. And that's people love those, don't they? And we've also got the mugs. Oh, tote bags as well. Have you got those? Oh, you've got them. Good. Yeah. So, it's all about building awareness amongst all of the generations in town. And also, having done all that, we've now, what should we say, partnered up with nearby towns. This is, you probably remember, this is the Swift Mapper display. There's little old Wolverton there with our 170 boxes. I'll keep saying that. Here's Stony Stratford with, I think, I don't know, probably about 30 boxes now, because we only set that up last year. And there's New Bradwell, which is an underestimate, actually. There are more boxes than that. And that was set up by somebody in 2022, Sean Mackay. We've also got a Newport Pagnell group, but let's just say that's rather slower taking off. Yes, so hands up. No, it doesn't. And we've also kind of shared our learnings that, as I said, there are loads and loads of groups, Swift groups around the country. And what we've learned in these 4.5 years, we've kind of documented and we share with anybody that's interested in setting up a new group. Anyone? Yeah, they've got a page. Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry, you from Fisherman. Oh, no, sorry. Yes, they've got a group as well, but it's a page. So we really, we've had a fantastic journey doing all this. We've learned so much. We are having some success already with the Swifts occupying small numbers of the boxes, which is not surprising. And we really want to help others, do it as well. So, that's right. So we had an initial grant from Wolverton Council. We've had a grant from Stony Stratford Council, and we're just getting a grant now and putting the boxes up from New Bradwell Council. And that also means that by cooperating with those councils, we get to write articles in their local magazines. This is ours in Wolverton. This one, I think, is Newport Pagnell, and that one's Stony. This one here is a different story altogether. This is Kent's Hill, where we, you actually, rose to the challenge of a building being netted and robbing quite a large Swift colony of their homes. Eventually, the local councils got involved, and spoke to the owners of the building, Guinness Homes, and they rapidly took the netting down. So that was a major success. And I think it was just in time for the breeding season, if I remember. Yeah. Temporary boxes. Yeah. Yeah. So again, you know, this is all about awareness. The more articles we can write and get it out there, the better it's going to be. So here's the one. How can you help? What we really need actually is, and you know, you've got some expertise here, is that we need to get surveying when the swifts are here. When they're not here, you can't see where they are, if you know what I mean. You can't see where they're nesting. In season, when they are here between May and August, we really need to get around and decide, you know, where those natural nest boxes are, not nest boxes, natural nest sites are. If any of you are keen on doing that in any of our groups, we'd really appreciate that, because it's a valuable thing. All the records that go on to Swift Mapper, sponsored by the RSPB, are going to be, or maybe are already, used by planning authorities, so that ideally they don't disturb existing colonies. There's a house martin app as well now, which is in trial at the moment. Here's another one, of course: set up a local Swift group. Anybody that wants to do that, we'd love to support you and help you and provide you with our learnings. And the least you can do is install artificial nest boxes. Again, we can provide you with information on suppliers, including the lovely Ian, and installer details too. So this is all not difficult to do, and we're here to help. And that's it. Are there any questions? I hope.
Oh, it's working. Yes. I'll take the mic. Well, thank you for your talk, first of all, Paul.
Yeah, thank you.
And it was a very encouraging presentation.
Thank you.
Right.
Hi. First of all, thanks for this evening. Thanks for everything you do. 2 questions intrigue. With a natural swift site, assuming they're getting into the building, where do they nest then? Is it in the cavity or in the loft space? They just find somewhere in the attic?
Yes, to all of that.
Right. Okay.
They will. If they get into the loft, they're not going to go very far. You know, some people are a bit nervous about them flying around the loft and getting in their hair and all that sort of stuff. You need a mic, really.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and the other one is, if you're installing your own nest box, what orientation of the house do they prefer?
Good. That's the most important one. Not south facing.
No.
That sounds obvious, but it's not always. North or east is best, because it gets minimum sun, particularly with our summers getting hotter. So, excuse me, cuddling this. Particularly with our summers getting hotter, you really don't want the chicks getting hot, getting close to the edge and falling out before they're ready. So that's the aspect. Not south, absolutely not. North and east is best. Height is really important. Lack of obstructions is vital. Not for the adults, because by the time they're breeding, they're 2 or 3 years old, and they're as mobile as you like. But the chicks, when they fledge, all they do is just drop out the hole and, God willing, open their wings at the right time. So what you don't want is, or what you do want is for the nest box to be as high as possible under the eaves in a 2-story house, but with no obstructions below. None. And they've got 1 or 2 seconds to open their wings, and then they're off to Africa.
Thank you.
Wow.
You want to add?
Yeah, I was just say we'll get a bit of feedback. I don't know if you know the artist Jonathan Pomeroy, that he does a lot of blogging about swifts, and he's got a lot of house martins and swifts on his site. And this year he's been noticing as the young fledge, they don't actually drop. They go higher than the adults. They've spoiling our theory, but it's a new thing this year.
We're learning.
Yeah. Every year, we learn something new. But they put a lot of force in, and they fly really high. Use their energy to get up high, and then they're off. But yeah, different again. But still 4.5 meters. But you're saying about the coming in, where they come into the your loft space. That was the trouble with the Kent's Hill one, is people were worried that they were coming into their space, but they're actually, that one is a funny design, one of the modern buildings, and it's just an empty space. So they weren't actually being able to get past a brick wall. They were just going in. So it's different on each building. A friend of mine's got a Victorian house in Wolverton, and she went into a loft and actually saw a swift in the corner. Just crept back out again. So some, it depends what your space is like, but a lot have they're just coming in a little gap and not getting into access. But yeah.
One pair, make one hole, or 7 pairs share.
That's like Martin's got something to say. You do get a row in, a few in a row. That has been known, yeah. One hole and a few can go in, but not.
I was going to could you just say a little bit about the rescue and rehab? Because when you were saying that before, you weren't mic'd, so I don't think people did. Could you just repeat what you said earlier about the rehab of swifts?
Yeah, so in 2022, when it was the heat wave, when a really bad heat wave, and there were so many swifts falling out of their nests, that the person we normally take them to in Aylesbury, who does swift rehabbing, was getting a bit overwhelmed by them. I was bringing a few in, like say she takes up to 60 a year, all these boxes in her house with them, and they have to be fed the nearest thing we can get to what they would catch. They would live off airborne spiders and lots of different insects in the air, but we can't replicate that. We're never going to catch enough. So you have to feed them on crickets, but not any old crickets. They have to be a certain size ones that we have to get from, not ones that are native to here. So you should, have to get Amazon orders of hundreds of crickets, and then they have to be fed to be a bit more nutritional value, and then have to hand feed them, because they won't just take them like if you were feeding a robin or something. They'll just take it from your hands. We have to open their beaks are really tiny because they don't need them to do much, but a big gape mouth. So you have to, the way they have to open them as well is really specialised, because you can break their beaks otherwise. So it's not for everybody just to do. And then hand feed them these crickets, which they don't want. That's not natural for them to have this. So there's a lot of regurgitating. So it's not an easy job at all. And then they have to be supplemented with lots of different vitamins. And she's got a list of different things that she'll add to their diet to be specific for swifts. And then, like I say, they have to be weighed every day to make sure they're gaining the right weight. And if they're not, some people will still give it a go. It's not a hobby sort of thing, but people will still give it a go, and all they're putting on weight, they're growing, but their feather development hasn't developed properly. And then it comes to releasing, and they're not going to make it. So it's really important that they go to rehabbers. So I ended up having to take some of hers on in 2022. She had to teach me how to do it. It's not something I would want to do again, because it was really hard. And it just happened to be because of that heat wave. I couldn't work. My work was all cancelled because it was all outdoors. So I had time, but I just still didn't have enough hours in the day. So I had 17, I think, in the house over that time in boxes, and they just kept coming in. Can you take another 5? No. But it was a really good experience because we all got to release them. People were chipping in. The locals were coming around with donations of food that they're helping us. Or, you know, one thing is you're feeding them, but then you'll go, cool, can you pick one up from Bedford? Can you pick one up from Luton? Not really. So there are a lot of people volunteering to bring them in as well. So it was a good community then.
Once again, social media has come into its own because because this is a growing problem, and there are growing numbers of groups around the country. There's a group now called, I can't remember what it's called. It's like an SOS group where if somebody says they've found or picked up or whatever a swift on the ground, they can log that. And this group will then find the nearest rescuer to start with, and then find the nearest rehabber to, swift taxi, exactly. That's what it's called. That's, that's another thing you could do. Thank you very much. On the list. So, I keep, banging on about social media, but it's got some really good points, particularly in groups that have common interests.
We might have a few more questions.
Yeah, please.
I think you were wanting to ask. Yeah.
Really, I was just wondering about is the density of nest boxes like how many would be appropriate? Is there a maximum number or?
No, they're very, very sociable birds. Some of the more enthusiastic swift people have loads of them on their houses. So one is nothing, two is nothing. Yeah.
Given that the food supply is getting scarcer, have you obviously one of these effects is going to be insecticides. Have you thought about persuading farmers to change their policies to be a bit more swift friendly?
There are two of us. Yes, I mean there are larger groups within the swift community which are doing those sort of things, but sorry.
We have a question over here, yeah?
Yeah.
Sorry, are you going to ask a question? Yeah.
Well, it's just on this subject of insecticides. I mean, the decline in the population you showed over the past 20 years is horrifying.
It is.
And that is mirrored by, for instance, the lack of sparrows recently.
Yeah.
So, which is definitely down to insecticides, I think. Yeah. As you say, there's no food for them.
Yeah.
So surely, apart from looking after the creatures, the main target is on the farmers because I've been around the farms around here. And in the summer, they are out with their tractors spraying all sorts of noxious chemicals, which actually made me choke. I had to back off and get away from the field. It was that bad. That seems to be the main issue, wouldn't you say?
And how many butterflies have we seen this year?
Yeah, very few.
It's all part of it.
Yeah.
Well, there's only two of us.
Do the rescued swifts get ringed, and are they monitored to find out what happens to them at all? And one other question: where would they nest if there weren't any houses? I mean, where did they originally nest?
Oh, originally, and we're talking, hundreds and thousands of years ago, they were in trees, and I believe there are some isolated colonies that still nest in trees. Just to clarify, we only get one species of swift in this country, the so-called common swift. There are, I think it might be 20 species of swift worldwide, some of which do still nest in trees. But the common swift is completely reliant on human habitation. I've forgotten what the first one was. Oh, ringing.
So I asked the lady who does the hand rearing of the swifts about ringing. Does she ring hers? Because she is a ringer. And she's really anti it because she said the likely chance of you actually catching that same one again is very, very small. And their feet being so small, it's quite hard to tag them and could they cause damage. So she's quite anti it. But I have been out with a local ringer who was doing it at a particular site. So it was a known site and they were recording the same ones. So some people do it, but not everyone's. They're not, the rehabbers probably don't do it to theirs because where they go isn't where they're going to end up breeding. So if you catch it from their nest site, that's one thing, but not the rehabbed ones because they will go off and they'll breed somewhere totally different. You'll never catch that same one again.
A question here.
Thank you. Not so much a question, just a comment, something to think about. We all have bad feelings about what's going on with the decline in insects. Just think about higher up the food chain, like us. What's it doing to us as well?
I don't want to be a downer about this, but the one question I was going to ask, with the putting up of artificial nest boxes for the house martins, I have a case where I was working a long time ago in Flitwick, and we were on an estate coming back from, I had a work party out there, and we had some grounded house martins. And when we looked at them, they were covered in a particular louse, which they get. And the same with swifts, they get a particular louse as well. And I gather they overwinter in the nesting things. So is there a necessity at some point to clear out the nest boxes?
That's the question that comes up a lot in the various swift groups. And the general answer is that the louses, or is it lice? Louses and birds have evolved in parallel. Right. And the louses would not over-predate, if you like, the bird, because it wouldn't be in their interest. So the general answer to that sort of question is, don't worry about it. Okay. There's also the practicality. It's quite difficult to get back up there again. Yeah. But unfortunately, you don't need to. They leave very little nesting material. Yeah. They take the fecal sacs away, so there's no feces in there. So that makes them, from the human perspective, very tidy. Yeah. Unlike house martins. Yeah.
Yes. So I'll just say that very quickly about that particular thing. Some time ago, I was in Tottenham and I'm coming back on a bike, and this woman is leaning out of the window about to knock down a house martin nest, and I was absolutely furious. I said that I was born in Dunstable, so Tottenham is quite close to me. So I thought, well, you know what? And so I as carefully as possible and not swear, told her this thing come all that way to find her house, to nest on her building. Why would you want to destroy its own house and the rest of it? And she did listen to me, whether or not that she do it again. And then I said, also, if you're worried about the fecal sac things, you can just put a little shelf or something there and collect that and change it every day. They just, as you know, they just put them outside, don't they? They don't carry them away. Yep. And so if, you know, what's the problem with a few fecal sacs?
That is the solution. A lot of people just do put a shelf some quite a long way down to catch it. And apparently it's very good for hydrangeas. That's another ridiculous fact we learned. So why not? You know, free fertilizer.
Right, just maybe one or two other questions, if there's anything else. Yeah. Tim.
Thanks, Mervyn. My question is about migration routes. You showed one on a slide. It was the southward migration was down the Western Sahara, and the northward migration was somewhat to the east of that. BTO's done a lot of work with tracking cuckoos, and they found that they have two alternative southward migrations. One is down through Western Sahara, and one is down, effectively goes down the Italian peninsula and then hops across there. And they found that the Western Sahara route for the southward migration is significantly less. The survival rate is significantly worse than the survival rate of the route down in Italy. How much work has been done on swift migration routes, and is there more than one, or do they all go down the Western Sahara?
My feeling is that there are multiple routes. I haven't read anything in detail. No, I don't think so. Martin, do you know any? Oh, didn't see Mike. Oh, didn't see Mike there.
Swift migration. You know far less about swift migration than most other birds, and there hasn't been electronic tagging on any great scale. Even with, say, cuckoos, that's only in the last handful of years. I think there's a huge amount yet to be found out about swifts.
I think
swifts are so small.
Yeah, of course, the one place where they have been able to catch swifts regularly for best part of 100 years is the Oxford University Museum of Natural History, where they nest in the tall tower of the museum and have done for many, many decades.
I think the other point to make, though, is that as we've realised this year, that there's an enormous variability depending on the weather. You know, as I said earlier, they normally arrive in Wolverton in the first week of May, and they were so late because the weather over the whole of Europe was dreadful, and apparently there were a lot of that first wave of adults being completely waterlogged and found on the ground. So you know that in itself is another variation.
I was interested in your timing of your first arrival. This year, I said to myself, oh, you know, they're late this year. And I checked my diary, and it was exactly the same day as the previous year.
Oh, really?
It was the 6th of May.
It certainly wasn't in Wolverton. Yeah.
And then the other thing, people kept saying to me, oh, there aren't so many this year. And a couple of us went and did counts, and actually the numbers were higher than last year, wherever we actually did the best count we could. So I always go on actually measuring rather than having a guess. One last one, and brief, please. Yeah.
That's it.
We used to live in Newport Pagnell, and a swift came down out of its nest box straight onto the wire and got stuck. So we had to get somebody to get a long ladder to get it out. What my question is, there's so many of those telephone wires going all over everywhere. Is there going to be any plans to remove those? Because we don't need them now, do we?
Interesting. Good point.
So I don't know if you remember the slide with the ladders going up. That was my house. Right outside, I've got telegraph wires because I thought, well, I'm going to give it a try, and it worked. They've still come. They've come back for 2 years, and they dodged the wires, and chicks are fledged. It's not been a problem, but I was worried because it's directly outside my house, this telegraph pole, but it hasn't caused a problem. So
makes you wonder how it got caught up. Yeah, okay.
Right. I think like ours is a fixed. Whereas I think the telegraph wires are fixed. They get their eye into it. You see them going a few times before they'll go for it, and then I've worked out that path and how to dodge the wires, and they learn it quickly.
It's a good point, though, isn't it? Now everybody wants us to have Wi-Fi phones. Who's going to pay to take the wires then?
Right. Thank you for all your questions. Very good. And thank you, Paul, and your friend. Sorry, I forgot.
Emma.
And Emma, sorry.
thank you for your presentation, which has been very interesting and certainly most encouraging to see all the good work you're doing. So maybe we could